Good day and welcome to another segment of In the Spotlight. I'm Superintendent Michael Richard, and today I'm pleased to be joined by two staff at the middle school, Chris Taft and Sue LaFlamme. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about makerspace. But before we get too deep into that, take the opportunity to tell the audience at home a little bit about yourselves, what you do at the middle school, and maybe a little bit about what you like to do in your free time so that we can really understand who you are. Sue, why don't you start?
So I'm Sue LaFlamme. I am the library media specialist at the middle school, but that's my title, but more commonly known as a school librarian. I live in West Springfield. After I started working here, I bought a house here, so I am part of the community. One of my passions is genealogy, so I combine how I do research with family history, and I do like history.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really cool. Maybe we could talk a little more about that later. Mr. Taft, how about you?
My name is Christopher Taft, 8th grade science teacher at the middle school. I've been at the middle school now for 7 years. It's my home away from home. My actual home is East Hampton, Massachusetts, and in my spare time I love to play guitar, or at least attempt to, and just work on projects around the house. Anything I can do. Yeah.
All right, that'll keep you busy
Yeah.
For sure. So we are here to talk about the makerspace, and we've got some creations here that we're going to get to talk about in a few minutes. But what is a makerspace? How did it come to be at West Springfield Middle School, and how are you guys using it collaboratively and independently?
So the makerspace is located in the library. Mr. Gillen had gone to a conference, the NELMS, New England League of Middle Schools, and he brought back the idea, which I had heard of, but I wasn't sure how it would work in our school. We did visit a middle school in East Longmeadow because they had a makerspace, and then we came back at the end of last school year. And really a collaboration between me, the custodian, Pete Whitney was involved with putting electrical drops and creating an area in the library. Pete put out a call to parents who have made donations. We've had some professional development from Tim Connors. So a lot of people, focused on getting it ready. And what it is essentially is it's a place in the library with different tools and materials where students can come in with their teachers, usually to support something they're doing in the classroom, and create something hands-on.
Very cool.
And they usually associate it with science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM subjects, but there's also A for STEAM as well.
For the arts, for sure.
Right.
So Chris, as a science teacher, how have you utilized the makerspace?
Well, Mr. Gillen, right off the bat, the very beginning of the school year, ever the competitive spirit that he has, put together a little competition during our first couple of professional development days that we had, where we had a task that we had to perform, and we basically competed as a staff to get that task accomplished, and I was hooked right from that moment. The biggest project that I had my students do in the makerspace involved basically exploring Newton's 3 laws of motion. Typically what we would do is we would give them a very cookie cutter kind of lab assignment where they're using predetermined supplies and they're putting them together in a certain way and kind of arriving at an outcome that we've sort of determined as teachers. This year, knowing we had the makerspace, I talked to Sue, reserved it for a day, and we went down to the makerspace with the end goal in mind that they would simply model those 3 laws of motion any way, shape, or form that they wanted to. And I didn't really know what to expect, but 55 minutes in, I was blown away by the level of engagement, the creativity that the students applied to it, just how invested they were into it. It's not a tremendously exciting topic, and they were full bore into it. They absolutely loved it.
That's amazing. So it leads me to question the idea of how are we as a district and at the middle school using the makerspace, moving away from encouraging kids to be able to follow directions, which is what the original assignment would be,
Right.
to using their minds and being creative and exploring and getting hands-on, ultimately raising the level of engagement for students, which is what I'm hearing is happening. So tell me, so when you see kids coming into the library and using the makerspace, is there excitement in their eyes?
There is, and there's a bit of a challenge too, because our makerspace is very low tech because we have very little budget, and we have donated materials. So they're seeing materials that are kind of everyday things that they need to kind of repurpose, use in a different way, and they have to put their heads together and try to design something, and then they have to test it and then go back and maybe change that design. And they work in teams too, and kids enjoy working in teams. And it's a bit of a challenge to say, well, what can I do with this? How can I make this work for that problem? So it's different and it's hands-on as opposed to being in the classroom. So it's just a different level of doing something.
Very cool. So teacher-directed versus student-centered, and this is clearly some student-centered work. So Chris, we've got some things here in front of us.
Yes,
You want to tell me a little bit about what it is that we're looking at and what we've got?
Sure. So, again, I went into the makerspace a couple of months ago for the project that the students did on Newton's 3 laws. These are actually from Joanne Tradiak, another 8th grade science teacher, and she went into the makerspace to have students do a genetic research project where they would basically look up the traits of 2 different creatures. They could throw caution to the wind, they could be kind of fantastical, go against reality, and basically combine the traits to create something that is sort of a super version of the 2 original creatures. It's a hybrid of them. So she actually held on to a couple of the models that students made. This is one of them, a peacock and an owl. And I don't know exactly what the traits are of it, but she had students do a written component where they had to say how it's an improvement over the original. We have another one here. This is a poster that a student made. It's a combination of an elephant and a butterfly. So they really had to delve pretty deeply into how the traits would be inherited, whether they were dominant or recessive, why the trait might make some sort of advantage for the organism. And they were basically challenged to, rather than just being told to make a poster, write a paper, etc., they had the materials at their disposal, put that there, at their disposal to go outside the box of what we would normally do just being in the classroom. Instead of being directed, here's your task, you have some autonomy over how you're going to go about completing it.
For sure. So tell me about the feedback you're getting from the kids. I'm hearing, from the staff side, from the faculty side, it's exciting, it's different, it's creative. You see it as engaging. What are the kids telling you?
Mr. Taft, when can we go back? Awful lot of that. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. They really love it. They
Okay.
love it. Yeah.
All right. So
When they come in the library, they're just very excited. And I just wanted to show you this particular project. This was, again, using what we had. It was a 2-part assignment. Kids had a writing assignment, and then they did a shoe sculpture, which is supposed to represent themselves. Kids who maybe weren't always engaged in the classroom really got into doing this. It's supposed to represent the student based on the colors and the objects. So we had wheels, we have beads, we have chopsticks, duct tape. So kids are excited about doing it, and they can be very creative as well as doing something that's supposed to fulfill an assignment.
that's really cool. So being housed in the Library Media Center at the middle school, the Makerspace is changing the face of what that Library Media Center looks like. So you've been in the district for a number of years. How have you seen the library proper evolve and the use of the library evolve in the last 10 or 15 years?
It's really changed quite a bit. We have a very good library collection, but the nonfiction collection is not used as much as it used to be. Kids would come in and do research using the books, but with Chromebooks and computers, they're accessing that information online. I don't buy as many of those books that are nonfiction, but I do subscribe to, for example, a database. The 7th grade studies countries. Country books are about $35 to $40 a piece, and when you have about 100 countries that they're going to be covering, that's a lot of money. So I subscribe to a database called Culturegrams, which they can access that information online. It's updated. It's a fabulous resource for teachers as well as students. They can access it in the building or they can access it at home. And there are other databases as well. So the walls of the library no longer contain all of that information. But we do try to provide databases and good websites, because just Googling and taking whatever comes up first isn't always the best thing.
I know we've spent a lot of time in the district helping kids with their research skills so that they know that the first result is not necessarily the best one.
Right.
Chris, talk to me about science and how it applies to the makerspace, theory, application, modeling. How are you carrying over those skills that students need to acquire and applying them in your time in the makerspace?
Certainly. I think the biggest thing, it's kind of a buzzword, but inquiry. The makerspace really facilitates an inquiry-based approach to teaching science as opposed to basically just disseminating knowledge and expecting kids to memorize it, reproduce it on a test, and get a grade. So I like the fact that it's a very natural fit for inquiry, for critical thinking. It also makes it, I found, a lot easier to generate written work because students have something concrete that they've created as opposed to a theory that they may have learned. It's been presented to them by a teacher, but they can't really put quite literally their hands on what that theory or that idea is. When they're engaged in making it, when they're engaged in exploring it or seeing how that theory, that idea works, it makes it a lot easier to pull together the written piece, which is a big part of what we're trying to do in science, is not only have them understand the ideas, but be able to build upon those ideas, be able to communicate with others about those ideas, and not only verbally, but being able to write very articulately about what those ideas express and how they're evolving over time. I found that it all really does stem from the context that they build by doing the hands-on work.
Right.
It's made a big difference.
Application of knowledge
Absolutely.
is critical to their success.
Right.
So I appreciate the time that we spent together this morning. If somebody had a question about the makerspace and wanted to learn a little bit more, where could we direct them?
Are you talking about parents or staff?
Parents, staff, students who are out there who might say, I'm getting ready to go to the middle school next year, and I want to be ready to know what I'm going to be seeing and experiencing.
Well, they can go to the school website,
Sure.
which has information. They can contact, me or Mr. Gillen, but we have a lot of information at the school website. We have pictures of things going on. We have a list of supplies we're always looking for donations for. And for staff, I have purchased a number of books with ideas that they can incorporate into their lessons. So
Great.
I would recommend the school website.
Sure. But if somebody wanted to send you an email, they would send it
Oh,
to
absolutely.
LaFlamme at WSPS.org.
Yes.
And Mr. Taft, they would send it to Taft, T-A-F-T,
Correct.
at WSPS.org.
Yep,
Great.
exactly.
So as we wrap up, the famous last question is, if you had your druthers, who would you want to see sitting in the hot seat in the spotlight?
Well, I have an idea. I feel that there are a lot of teachers who have very interesting side things that they're interested in, and one of them would be Chalk Dust, which is a band comprised of teachers. And Mr. Taft is a member of Chalk Dust, and I would have said that
Oh, boy.
answer regardless of whether he was sitting here or not.
All right.
Because I think
if
it's very
dangerous.
cool.
I'm not sure if he's going to get a pass as a member of the band now, but we do know that a lot of middle school teachers are part of that project known as Chalk Dust, and it's an engagement. Kids love it. Kids
But
love
other
it.
teachers as well, I bet, in
Absolutely.
the district have very interesting things they do that make them, I think, better teachers.
All right. So I'll dig deeper with you a little later. I will nail you down to an individual.
Okay.
Chris, how about you?
Okay, in the interest of an individual, he may not be happy hearing this, our school resource officer, Eric Johnson. He has the obvious day-to-day job of a police officer in the school. Everybody knows that. We see him with Pike, easily the most popular living organism in the building. Beyond that, though, Officer Johnson came into class for me a couple of months ago and did a lesson on reconstructing accident scenes, reconstructing how police can investigate car crashes. I was blown away. He's really great in front of the kids, presenting information in a manner they can understand. I've seen him do so in front of health classes. I know he's gone into a few other classes. There's a lot there beyond the day-to-day police element that he does in terms of education.
That's great.
I think it'd be fascinating.
There's great collaboration between the public schools and the police department.
Certainly.
So I think that's a great opportunity for us to bring Officer Johnson. Maybe Officer Wise can join him. Thank you both
Thank you
for
for
your
having
time.
us. Thank you
for having us
Absolutely,
very much.
absolutely. I want to remind everyone that if you are interested in learning more about the makerspace at West Springfield Middle School, you are encouraged to visit the middle school's website or to contact Ms. LaFlamme or Mr. Taft at their email addresses. Once again, thanks for joining us in the spotlight, and I look forward to meeting with you again.